programs, but also they have been also trying to come up with some innovative ideas and to meet the challenges posed by this COVID-19. And in the same sync, we have the convener of this SLC Innovation Council. She will tell you in more detail. So we have also thought about coming with some very pragmatic and very innovative things, which will not only benefit us, but is likely to have some impact in the social sector also. So that is our vision. I hope all the students, coordinator, starting from answers to Gauri, and all the active student volunteers of Innovation Cell will carry this vision to come out with some bright ideas, come out with some solutions the society is facing right now. So it will be extremely not only useful for them to be good human beings, but also it will be extremely useful for the society if they can come out with good solutions to the problems. With these words, I won't take much time. So I once again welcome you all. So now the SLC Innovation Council convener is there. She would like to add something. Okay, thank you. Please unmute her.
Yeah, that has happened. Welcome all and good afternoon. I welcome Ms. Tanya Kapoor to this webinar. I want to thank her for accepting our invitation to be the resource person for this event. And the topic sounds very interesting and contemporary. I hope all our students are going to be benefited by this interaction, and definitely it will help them understand the dimensions of entrepreneurship in contemporary times. So I request Ms. Tanya Kapoor to please take over and start the session.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for such a warm welcome, and I'm very excited to interact with all the students and everybody present in the webinar. And before I begin, I'll just give you guys a little bit background about my experience. So should I go ahead with the same? Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Okay. So basically, I've been working in the startup ecosystem for a while now, and I have realized that sometimes students and first-time founders especially have a lot of misconceptions when it comes to entrepreneurship. And I as a person also did not understand the ecosystem and startup ecosystem as well before I entered into it and worked with founders and mentors firsthand. So which is why I often go ahead and interact with founders and students through various sessions and webinars and college events. So that is why I was very excited for this session. And yeah, I would love to just delve into the questions which you guys have and just go ahead and answer them. So yeah.
That'll be great. Thank you so much, Tanya. So now I think we'd like to begin with the questions.
Yeah.
So the first question I have for you is that is it a wise decision to opt entrepreneurship over intrapreneurship considering all the risks?
Okay, so that is a very good question. And both when it comes to entrepreneurship and intrapreneurship, there is a lot of innovation, exciting work that is involved, and both of them can be very fulfilling if your passions lie there, right? So one thing all of you need to understand is that this is a question which nobody can answer for you, and this is a question. The answer to this question is something you have to discover for yourself, because for some people entrepreneurship might be the greatest thing in the world, whereas for some people entrepreneurship will also work, right? So I as a person can offer you perspective over it, but the decision has to be yours. So when we talk about entrepreneurship, there's one thing which you guys have to be very mindful of, is that you have to remember that there is no new idea in the world. There is nothing new under the sun, right? So whatever idea of a startup that you guys have, or innovative solution that you have, has somewhere or sometime been thought of by somebody else, right? And that is the truth. And once you start off and you enter the industry, that is what you realize. So you have to ask yourself that if you as a person are going to go ahead and implement that idea and build that company, what makes you guys specifically well equipped to do that when somebody else couldn't do it, right? So do you have like a better team on board? Do you have a specific amount of expertise in that particular topic which will make you, which will enable you to do so? Do you have extraordinary amount of financial backing which that person did not have? So these are the questions that you have to answer. And you know, especially in times like these where you know, considering the risk, there are so many industries where if you have a startup now, it's going to be a huge problem. For example, travel, right? Because travel has stopped completely, and which is why Oyo as a company is also facing so much problem. But on the other hand, there are also a lot of companies which are winners in this situation. For example, streaming services, the amount of time people spend on you know, mobile phones and computers have increased. So you have to understand on which side your startup idea lies. Is it on the side which will benefit from this pandemic, or is it on the side which will, where it will be at a disadvantage? So again, that is also a factor that you have to keep in mind before you make this decision. But that being said, I firmly believe that entrepreneurship is very, very fulfilling. And in fact, it has a lot of advantages because you are doing it in an already established structure with backing of some amazing people, right? So implementation also becomes easier. So yeah.
Okay, I get it. Thanks. Okay, so the next question is that how to maintain the spirit while continuing the startup in the long run?
Yeah. So again, starting a company and making it run is a marathon, and you cannot build a company in 2 years. It is a decade-long process. And if you just go ahead and you know, look at journeys of startups, you know, every big company, almost every big company, it took them years and years to you know, build that company. So in this situation, there will come a point where you know, you will start questioning yourself, where you will get drained of energy. And in this situation, you have to remember one thing which is very, very important, is that first is that if you're not passionate about what you do, you will not be able to stick in it, because otherwise it's going to be so tough. Only if you're truly passionate about what you're doing, you'll be able to continue it for such a long time. The second thing is that, and you know, this is something which Sheryl Sandberg said once. She's the CEO of Facebook, and she said that you know, resilience is not fixed. You're not born with a fixed amount of resilience. So resilience is like muscle, and you can build on it with more and more experiences by training your mind and you know, surrounding yourself with people who uplift you. So when it comes to you maintaining that spirit, first of all, it is very important to have like a great team on board, which is why people who start off with a co-founder as opposed to somebody who starts off alone, it is much easier to do it with a co-founder, because you know, if one person is feeling low, another person can lift them up. Also, another thing which can help in this case is to have great mentors on board who can you know, help you and guide you through the tough times. And those people have a lot of experience, so they know that you know, which problem is going to come when, and you know, when you should just persevere and when you should pivot. And also, when I say that you know, it is important to be resilient, that doesn't mean that you know, if you're working on something that is not working, you continue putting in effort for that, right? You have to be very fast when it comes to experimentation when you're building a company, and you have to pivot very quickly. If you know that one idea or one concept is not working out for you guys, you have to pivot and move towards another thing. But that doesn't mean that you'll give up altogether and be like, oh, humse to nahi ho raha, this is, let us just take up another job. So that is how I feel. That is what I feel about this.
Yeah, because you know, I've heard it from many people that like getting into a startup and working on it is quite tough, and sometimes it takes such a long time that people just you know, keep the
Yeah.
things where they are and just leave it over there. So that is the thing, that we should just be consistent there.
Consistent. And also I'll just tell you one more thing about this. See, the thing is that once you raise money, right, you will be taking a salary home. So again, it becomes, once you raise money, things do get easier. So it's not like it's always going to be as tough as the first 2 years. So if you look at any big company, their founders are taking a decent amount of money home. They're building their own company. So you just have to be cautious of these things. And yeah, it's going to be challenging, but at the end of the day, it's your company and the rewards are out of the world. So you have to like get through with it.
Actually, we have a question over here. Like, what do you look for in an employee? The most important to many people is that they fit in the corporate culture. So, what according to you can be the answer?
So again, different people look for different things when they are trying to hire an employee. I personally, the only thing that matters to me when I'm, hiring persons, especially at entry level roles, or people at who are just a couple of years into their work life, the most important thing is that they should be hardworking somehow. Because if they're willing to put in the work, they can acquire any skill. But if they're not hardworking, there is nothing which any organization, no amount of training can do. So I know it might sound very, very cliche, but if there is proof that that person has worked hard to achieve whatever goal they have achieved, that is a very important factor for me. And another thing which I will tell you guys is that in an interview, when it's a job interview, it is very difficult to identify this trait. You can identify the skills of the person, you can identify 10 other things, but you cannot identify whether the person is going to put in work when it really requires them to. So the only way I personally can identify that is by looking at the past experiences of that person, which is why this real-time experiences, your internships, your college society experiences, where you have done quantifiable work, that becomes very, very important.
Yeah. So that's a great answer. Thank you. And the next question is regarding some sort of MBA stuff. Like, we all know that MBA means Masters of Business Administration. But then, why does it seem to be more like an employee or a servant of business administration?
So I get why you guys are saying that. And the issue is that in our country, there are just too many applicants for too few jobs, right? So because of demand and supply, employees become less valuable to an organization as opposed to how valuable they should be, right? So for example, if I take out, I'm only telling you this from my experience, if I take out a paid internship opportunity, I did that a couple of weeks back. I think 4 weeks back, I took out a paid content writing internship for a personal project that I was doing. I got more than 150 applicants for one opportunity. So you can imagine the choice which employers have, right? Which is why employees become less valuable. And that unfortunately is the truth. And there's not much in that sense what we can do about it. Also, the only thing in this case that you guys can do to avoid that from happening is that be very, very good at your job, right? Develop skills that you become valuable, right? So what happens is that you have to learn to do the work which nobody else beside you can do, right? And once you reach that stage in your career, you become valuable to an organization, and that is when you'll be treated like a well-respected person. But if there is a situation where you are for the lack of better word, replaceable, then this will happen. And again, one way of doing that is to just be cautious of which organization you're working for, because there are some organizations which have a bad culture, but there are also a lot of organizations which have a great culture and they value employees. So be cautious of that. So I think that is how you guys should go about it.
Okay. Yeah, I get that. Yeah. So next question we have is the like searching for e-commerce opportunities for employment generation among college graduates. So what are your views
Yeah,
on that?
yeah. So I'll answer this question on two levels. So first is if you guys mean that you want to get a job in an e-commerce company, right? If you guys want to work for Flipkart and Amazon, and the second level is if you want to do something in the e-commerce space as a company or as a startup. So when it comes to entering the e-commerce space as a startup, that is going to be extremely hard, because that is a huge that I mean the market size is as big as it gets, because the whole world is your market when you do e-commerce space, which is why there are already very big players into it, right? So we have Amazon and Flipkart inside. How are you as college students supposed to compete with those people? So this is a very difficult space to enter as you know, as founders. So be very cautious if you're picking that, and also that is something you will not be able to do if you don't have immense backing of investors and, you know, stuff like that. If you just go ahead and look up how many rounds Flipkart has raised and how many rounds Amazon has raised, you'll realize how much money has went into these startups. Flipkart till date is not profitable. If they, after this much backing, decades of experience, and a superstar team on board can't do it, you have to understand how you have to differentiate yourself, and you have to convince yourself how you will be able to do it, because every decision has to be rooted in, you know, conscious decision making and rationality. That is very important, and you should know what you guys are getting into. So that being said, that is how I feel about you guys going into e-commerce space as a startup or as founders. But when you move to another side where you want to work for e-commerce companies, say Flipkart and Amazon, you know, stuff like that, I personally feel, and it's not just e-commerce companies, it is any big company. If you envision yourself there in those big companies in say senior roles, the best way to go about it is to do an MBA, I believe, because you know, and I do believe that MBA benefits you a lot when you want to enter a big company. And I know, considering the last question, I know you guys don't are very you know, skeptical about doing an MBA, because the investment involved is also huge. MBAs are quite expensive, and but personally, I do feel it helps, because when you do an MBA, you enter at a manager level position. I mean, not a manager level, but a very good position, and you know, you get a very good start. So that helps you grow faster. Another thing that happens is that when you enter these big companies after doing an MBA, you will be earning a very decent amount of money, right? Few years after an MBA, you'll probably, if you do well, you will start earning in six figures, right? And what happens when you are earning decent amount of money is that when you face challenges, you will just be able to convince yourself, okay, you know, they're making me work 12 hours a day, but I'm also earning a lot of money, so that's fine. But as opposed to a situation where you are, say, earning 30,000-40,000 rupees and you're working 12 hours a day, you are going to keep feeling bad about that. Okay, I'm not getting much money also, and I'm working so hard. And that is the hard truth. So which is why I believe that if you want to enter big companies, MBA is a good option.
Okay, we get that. Yeah. So actually, we're having a question over here that what are the opportunities for employment generation among college students in various areas of e-commerce?
See, again, the thing is that you have to be cautious about what products are you entering with when it comes to e-commerce, because again, I am very skeptical about how students will be able to manage that, because the competition is so immense that it's going to be very difficult. So if you can write in this section what how you are planning to go about it, you know, maybe I can just delve into it more. But right now, you know, if you just ask e-commerce space, I personally don't think it's an appropriate space for students, because it's a very difficult space. Okay, this is a good
So-
question. Can I answer this question? Um, when one has an idea to build a startup, where can one look for proper hand-holding and guidance to take it forward? This is a very good
Yeah.
question. Can I just answer this, Gauri?
Yeah, definitely, sure.
So again, so the thing is that it's not always that easy to find mentors also, because you have to be cautious of whose advice you're listening to, and that's very, very important. In a country like India, free advice is doled out like a mithai in a wedding. So everybody is like giving you advice even when they don't know much about it. So you have to have good mentors on board who have either worked in a startup space or they have worked in a particular space where you guys are going into. So one very good way of getting those people on board is to write them emails and messaging them on LinkedIn with a proper plan. Okay, this is what we are trying to do, and this is exactly how I need your help, and it would be amazing if you can help us out with this. So don't message people on LinkedIn by saying, hey, help us out, please, what do you think of my idea? Because I get those emails every day and it's very difficult for me to respond to those. Right? If you just email and say, how is my idea? I don't know how an idea is. Every idea is good or bad depending on the implementation. You have to approach me with a proper plan, and you have to approach the mentor with proper questions so that they can go ahead and answer those questions, specific questions for you. So that is how you get mentors on board. That being said, you guys can always reach out to me with specific questions on LinkedIn. I try to answer every question that I get. And if it's a properly framed question and you guys are going into a fair amount of detail and you have thought it through, I will try to help you guys out. That is there. Also, nowadays what happens is that another way of approaching this is to work in the industry where you want to have your startup. So for example, you, Gauri, I'll just take your example. Say you are really interested in a fashion space. I would suggest that you go and work in a startup which is into fashion and which is into that space, right? At an entry level role, go and make contacts there and make sure that you meet people and you have a great relationship with everybody you meet at work, your supervisors, and get those people on board. And that is the smartest thing you can do. Flipkart and the founders were also they earlier worked with Amazon before they started Flipkart. MobiKwick's founders worked with PayPal before they started MobiKwik. So that's a very smart thing to do. Work in the space where you want to have a startup, make contacts there, get financial stability, and then go ahead and open your own company and get those people on board.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you for the question. Yeah. So we have another question that how women entrepreneurs can market their products well.
So again, I would like to start off and say that the challenges which are faced by women and men in the business space are very, very different. And all of us will not even realize at a certain point as to how difficult it is, the kind of challenges women face and how difficult it is for them to become successful as opposed to any man. So let me just read out a couple of lines from the CS Gender Study Report, which recently came out. And, so they have some statistics, and when I read those statistics, I was very, very disheartened because I couldn't have imagined the situation was this bad. So I'll just read one line from that report. It says that when it comes to female CEO representation, India occupies the third lowest rank in APAC, which is Asian Pacific countries, with 2% representation. So when you look at India and the CEO representation, Indian women are just there as 2% of the total people. And as well as the second lowest rank for female CFO representation, that stands at 1%. So amongst all the CFOs, only 1% are women. So at that time, I had no clue it is this bad. I was thinking, okay, it might be 70-30 and it might be 90-10. That is also something I can, imagine. I couldn't have imagined it is 99 and 1%, right? So I was personally very shocked when I read this a few months back, which made me realize even further as to how challenging it is for women, and also that the kind of challenges women face at work, men don't even realize, because those challenges are so subtle and just so ingrained that they're overlooked. So that being said, I understand there are different challenges and stuff like that happen, but even then there are some things when you approach, say, marketing, you have to be very gender neutral about it. There's nothing special you have to do when it comes to marketing because you're a woman founder, and you just have to devise smart strategies and have guidance of great people on board, and approach it from a very gender neutral manner, because unless your audience base is women, there's nothing specific you have to do because you're a woman founder. And maybe having the perspective of a female perspective will help you in terms of when you're designing strategies, say when you're targeting women. But if that's not true and you are having a gender it's gender neutral in that manner, you have to devise marketing strategies being absolutely gender neutral, and there's nothing special that you have to do about it.
Okay. So we have the next question, that what are your recommendations to mitigate the risks of pandemic that is going on these days on food security and nutrition? So do you think that these strategies will also be successful after 2 years from now? Because pandemic will surely have a long-term impact over
Yeah.
everyone.
So let me just answer this question by saying that the impact of pandemic on food security is going to be immense, because when we talk about food security, it is not just about the availability of food, any food, it is also about nutrition. So this is a problem which has been there in our country even before this pandemic. So basically what happens is, after Green Revolution, we always had enough food. So even poor people in our country, most of them don't go hungry to bed at night. And if you read studies, you'll realize this, that most people don't go hungry at night. But the problem is that the only thing they consume is carbohydrates, which is wheat and rice, because those are the things which are covered in government schemes, and you can obtain ample amounts of those for very little price. They don't consume fruits and vegetables and pulses, which is why they have nutrition deficiencies, and their children, if you notice, if you are passing by any chuggi, say, you will see a lot of children whose hair are a very different color. They're brownish and goldenish, whereas their stomach is they don't they're fat per se. The reason for that is that they're consuming a lot of food, which is roti and rice and stuff like that, but they're not having fruits and vegetables and stuff like that at all. And this problem is gonna get even more exaggerated because of the pandemic. Because again, people lose jobs. If they lose jobs, they will not buy things which are expensive, and that this problem is gonna aggravate. And also that's a problem because when you talk about COVID, you're more likely to get that virus if you are your body is weaker, right? So again, those people become more likely to get that virus. So that is the impact it's going to have on food security. That being said, when we talk about solutions when it comes to this, as of now, I very strongly believe that every government organization or any other corporates, also their CSR initiatives, or any organization that wants to help with this, needs to focus on containing the pandemic first. Because even if you go ahead and try to solve these problems, say, which is food security and people eating nutritious food, those things are going to take time to implement. And at this time, we don't have time. We have to contain the pandemic first, do everything in our power to do that. Once this is under control, we can move towards food security and see what kind of solutions we can implement to fix the situation. So say that if you're talking about, say, 1 year from now, when we know we have got situation under control and we are moving towards helping with the food security and the impact of pandemic on it, then we have to devise strategies which are going to work in the short term also, and which are going to work in long term also. So the question which you asked was that, are those strategies going to have an impact, work in the long run? We have to keep that in mind, that we are only implementing strategies which would work in the long term. So policy making is a very complex art, and that is why you need to have really, really good people doing that, because they have to predict what the long-term impact of that thing is going to be. So one thing which works in short-term and long-term as well is, just empowering people. And that is something which I do believe government to a certain extent is doing. So for example, when we look at food security, the major impact of that is going to be to people who live in rural areas and belong to lower income families, right? So especially when it comes to women, there are a lot of ways you can empower those micro entrepreneurs. There are a lot of women in villages that make homemade papad, they make homemade, food packets and stuff like that, and that is prominent. And there are also a lot of women who make a lot of stitching related stuff. They make jute bags, they make clothes in those little villages. So you need to set up corporations which can and organizations which can give them micro loans so that they can set up the structure. And that is how you impact these things in the long term. You empower the people who are going to solve this problem. And that is how I think you should go about it.
So the next question we have is that what, according to you, is the scope of agripreneurship after COVID-19 pandemic?
Okay, so again, when we talk about scope in general, first I'm going to just give you a very general sense of it, and then I'm going to delve deep into agripreneurship and my personal perspective on that. So when you say how is the scope of this particular field, you have to remember that scope of anything is good. If you're solving a real problem, you have a strategy in mind as to how you're going to implement it, and you're building things which people genuinely need, right? So if you leaving aside some sectors which are very, very adversely impacted, say travel, say transportation, and car manufacturing and stuff like that, those are the sectors which are very adversely impacted, and the scope of those in the near future is bad for those sectors. So if any of you wants to have a travel startup or something, now is not a good time to start that. Like, I would say that very explicitly, because I firmly believe that. That being said, when we come to agripreneurship, I personally believe the scope of that is immense scope of that exists. And the reason for that is that earlier we were living in an era where the most valuable thing at that time was oil and petroleum, and people used to call it black gold, right? Then we moved on to an era where people started saying that one of the most important things nowadays is data. And people said that you can mine gold from data, and a lot of incidents around it happened, and people realized what the power of data is, and stuff like that. Now moving forward, one thing which will probably happen is that one of the most important assets you can have is your immunity, right? Because the amount of immunity you have is going to decide how healthy life you're going to have, and what quality of your life is going to be. And that is going to happen because of this pandemic and the kind of impact it has on people. So we are going to move to a stage where immunity is going to become so important that people are going to become conscious consumers. So in India specifically, we are not conscious consumers. We eat anything we want, and we don't care about the long-term impact of that. If we look at everybody who's present here also, how many of us has actually went ahead and read the information at the back of our food packets ever? And we are that is going to start happening very soon, because what kind of food we eat is going to become very important. And also another step to that would be that people will start caring about how a particular food item is grown, what chemicals are used while farming it. And because of these things, the scope of agripreneurship becomes great, because and this is the problem which people are going to face, and this is something which is going to happen because of the pandemic. And which is why if you have any any idea in the agripreneurship space which solves these problems, which enables people to have healthier food and enables them to have better immunity and stuff like that. So I do think there is a scope for that.
So we have the next question, that who established their startups newly and are penetrating their products in the market to acquire clients in regard with the during and post pandemic scenario.
So again, I said this earlier also. So whenever there is a crisis, there are some people who benefit from it, and then there are some people who are harmed from it. So, and right now also there are a lot of startups which are benefiting immensely from this COVID situation. One of that spaces is EdTech, for example, because now all the education is happening online, and startups which are in the EdTech space are just going ahead and launching their own products, new products and services, and they are getting a lot of traction for that, because that is what is the need of the hour, right? But other than that, when we look at other startups which are getting harmed from it, uh, launching new products at this time is not a smart thing to do. The only thing they have to be cautious about is increasing their runway per se, and making sure that they survive the pandemic. And I'm going to tell you something which I have realized because of my experience, is that when you have your own company, the most important thing for you is to survive, right? No matter what situation happens, if you survive, there will come a time when you will grow, because some external thing is going to help you grow. So for example, we can say that Oyo is getting very, very adversely impacted because of the pandemic, and it is absolutely no fault of theirs. They didn't know this is going to happen, right? So Oyo is getting harmed. But if you look at other situations, sometime back when demonetization happened, Paytm and MobiKwik and other wallets grew like anything, because again, demonetization helped them, and again, they did not do anything for that. They were just prepared and they took advantage of the situation, and there were so many people they acquired as customers at that time who are using the product even after the demonetization is long over. So in any situation, there are winners and there are losers. So if you're on the winner side, you have to take full advantage of whatever is happening, and mold your strategies in a manner which will help you like do that. Also, if you're on the side which is getting adversely impacted, do not launch new products. The only thing you should be cautious about is to survive, because if you survive, one day you will grow. Another example of this is, can any of you tell me what the full form of PVR is? PVR. I'll give you like 20 seconds, just write your answer in the chat, right? If you have an answer. Okay, so I'm assuming nobody knows. I don't want people to Google it and then write it there. So I'm just going to tell the answer now. So another 5 seconds if somebody, yeah, exactly. So Nishant wrote the answer. It's Priya Village Roadshow. That's the full form of PVR. Yeah, thank you guys. I got the answer. So can you imagine what that company started off as and what it has become now? Just envision. So I know if you now I've told you about this, you guys will go ahead and read about it, and you realize that there was a merger and everything, and that is how the name came about. But you can still imagine, right? If you're patient, if you are patient, you will grow, and it's a marathon. You have to remember this. And there is this one person I really admire in the entrepreneurship space is Gary Vee, and he keeps on saying that this one thing, that when you have your own company, the first quarter is a decade, because only after 10 years things will start happening. If you have the patience for that, just start go into it. If you don't have the patience for it, don't go into it. And I personally would want everybody to take up entrepreneurship, but not because they have misconceptions about it. They should know what they're getting into, otherwise they will not be successful. That's what I believe. Yeah. So that's there. Should we pick some questions from here, a couple of them?
Yeah, sure. So I think we can go ahead with this question. of like, does the lean startup philosophy lead to more successful startups?
Yeah, definitely, 100%. So that is something you should. Anybody who wants to open their own company should go ahead and read this book called Lean Startup by Eric Ries, and it is a brilliant, brilliant book. And the important thing here is that you have to understand that you have to experiment and pivot very, very fast. So one mistake I see a lot of founders make is that, you know, they come up with an idea, then you know, they spend all their time and money in building the perfect application, and then they launch it, and then they see if it works or not. That is not how you're supposed to do it. You have to build a MVP first, which is a minimum viable product. You test it. If it is working, you build on new features, and then you go about it. So these are the things which you know, will be touched upon in that book, and I do believe everybody should go and read it. Yeah.
And Yati, to please repeat the name of the book.
It's Lean Startup by Eric Ries.
All right. Okay. So we can have the next question from here, which is like, what are some techniques startups use to initially draw attention to their product?
Guerrilla marketing. That is one thing that really, really works. If you have a startup and you have to come up with crazy marketing ideas which are out of the box, and you know, just go ahead and try and implement those. So I will give you an example of one. So you remember there was a time when the onion prices shot up. Shot up a lot, right? So at that time, you know, there's this company called Nearby, and it is run by the name of the founder is Ankur Warikoo, who I really admire as an entrepreneur. So his company, what they did was that they launched an offer on their application that we are selling onions for like 5 rupees a kg or something of that sort, something crazy, right? And there was an influx of people on that app to buy onions there, and they were genuinely giving them for 5 rupees per kg. But what happened in that case was that at the end of the day, when they analyzed it, their customer acquisition cost was the number of customers they managed to acquire by doing that was much customer acquisition cost was much lower than what it otherwise would have been, right? So you have to come up with crazy strategies to do that. And you know, there's a lot of guerrilla marketing strategies which companies do. So I can just send you a picture of one more which we can you know, see if we can display it on the screen. You guys will have a better understanding of what guerrilla marketing is. And the thing is that it's such a smart strategy that you rely on it to go viral, right? Once it goes viral, your marketing spend is very low because you didn't put much money in you know, making it successful. So let me just send that picture to you guys, and you guys will understand what I'm saying when I say guerrilla marketing. So Gauri, you can just pick out another question tip till the time I'm like looking for that you know, ad. So it's just that once you realize what guerrilla marketing is, you guys can just you know, we'll come to this a little late towards the end of it, but I'm just gonna look for it if I can find it. Gauri, you can pick out another question till then.
Sure. So we have a question here where someone's asking that every time I come up with an idea to build an app, there is something similar already available. So should I still go ahead with building my app, or what shall I do?
If you have something which is different from theirs, and you know that's a problem people are facing, you can go ahead with it. So the thing is that again, I said that there is nothing new under the sun, right? So but that doesn't mean that you guys will not open companies and you will not do anything, because sab kuch already exists karta hai. If you are able to find a gap, if you are able to do the same thing which that person is doing in a better manner. And also there is no harm in being say a brick in the wall. What I mean by that is that there are a lot of people, if you what happens is that if you see a company that's doing really well in a space and you realize that that's the only company that exists and the market share is huge and you need a slice of the pie, right, you can enter that space. In fact, what happens is that that model is already validated by your competition. So I personally believe that there is something called a first mover's advantage, right? When you are doing something new and you're going ahead with the, an absolutely new thing and you're solving a new problem, there is advantage to that because, you are the first person to do that. I also believe that there's something called second mover's advantage because you know exactly what the other side is doing. They have pivoted, they have experimented, they have figured out the right model, and now you just have to go ahead and do a great job at implementing that, and you will be able to capture a slice of that pie if you're smart. So there's no harm in being another brick in the wall. If you are okay with being another person in that space, and okay with this idea that maybe you will never be bigger than your competition, and that might if that's okay with you, you can go ahead with the exact same thing also if you want.
Okay, so the next question we are having is that is freemium a stable economic model? And if yes, then why? Yes,
Freemium.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's a brilliant model. I think it's a absolutely brilliant model, and it is stable because you have to be smart as to how you're going to implement it, and there are some of the greatest companies in the world that are doing it. And so the thing is that you have to understand, smart people don't reinvent the wheel, right? If if there's a company that is successfully doing it, it means that it is a good model. Netflix does it when it gives you free 1 month. Amazon does it when it gives you first free month as free. Every company that you can imagine has this free wala thing. LinkedIn does it because they give you some services for free, and then you can buy a premium profile by just paying them money. So it is one of the most brilliant models that exist, and yes, they do work for sure.
Okay. Another question we are having is that what is your perspective to startup enterprise in current situation of pandemic that we discussed just now? And could you please suggest some investment limit and gap?
Sorry?
Could you please suggest some investment limit and gap during this period of time?
Again, okay, let me just read this question. So, can you just repeat it one last time? I'm so sorry. What, Gauri? Can you just repeat it?
Yeah. What is your perspective to startup enterprise in current situation of pandemic? Could you please suggest some investment limit and gap?
See, when it comes to investments, I personally feel that now it's going to be a little difficult for people to raise money at this situation. So again, when it comes to investments, you have to understand that that comes very late in your startup journey. You will not be able to raise any money for first 1 year in usual situations, and in most situations for the first 2 years. So solve problems as you reach them. Don't think about problems which you're going to face like 2 years from now. So initially you have to bootstrap your company and just go ahead with that. I'm not sure if I've answered your question because I can't find that question, and Gauri's voice is breaking. Maybe there's some network issue in my house. Gauri, can you just copy paste that question again on the Zoom chat?
Yeah, I'll just do it.
Yeah, again, I think that's the thing. at this point, any investment related issue is going to be a challenge, huge challenge, and you have to be cautious about that. And again, this is like a very technical question, so I will not like delve too much into it. But the thing is that, again, at this point, raising money is going to be extremely difficult unless you are in a space which is benefiting from the pandemic, like edtech or streaming or stuff like that. Yeah. So can I just go ahead and look at the question if I want to answer any? So yeah.
Can we go ahead with the question?
Yeah, go ahead.
I think this is the last question that we are having.
Mhm.
It's like, what are the ways to check the existing period of a startup or a child company other than their market capture?
What are the other ways of?
What are the other ways to check the existing period of a startup or a child company other than their market capture?
See, one way of understanding that market size and all becomes important. I get it, but the best way to check how a company is doing is their revenue and their traction. That is the most important things for me. If you are able to earn revenue and you have traction on the product, yeah, so that is how you go about it. 1 second. Let me just very quickly go through the question and see if there is any which I can answer very quickly. Yeah. So yeah, so basically I've sent Anshul that image that I was talking about. Anshul, you can show that image, guerrilla marketing wali, which I was saying. So he's going to show you guys that guerrilla marketing money image in a while. So that being said, let us just wind up the question answer round, and I will just go ahead and give a brief conclusion to whatever we have discussed and what primary lessons which I want you guys to take away from this webinar. So one thing which is very important is that you guys understand that you know, the biggest founders that you see in our industry, those people are nothing extraordinary, and they are very, very ordinary people who just decided, who had a lot of courage and perseverance and resilience. And I know when somebody else says it, it doesn't ingrain in your head, and you know, that happens. But it personally happened with me, that I went ahead and I spoke to people who are founders and doing some great work, people who are in Forbes 30 under 30, because of the work I did, right? So I was in the industry, and one thing I realized was these are very, very simple, normal people who just had more courage and more perseverance than other people. So that is something that you have to keep in mind. So this is the guerrilla marketing campaign which Axe ran very long time ago. So they put this Axe advertisement in front of like a exit door, and it went viral, and that is what guerrilla marketing is. So you guys get an idea. So you have to be very, very creative, and you will be able to get traction for your product if you are smart, right? And you are innovative and creative. So this is that Axe advertisement I was talking about. So yeah. So when so that is one lesson that I learned. Also, when we also one more thing that you have to realize is that never feel stuck in any situation. Anshul, you can remove this image now. Thank you. So one more thing that I would want you guys to understand is that you should never feel stuck in a situation. If you are in a job, if you are working anywhere and you are not happy, you have to work towards changing that situation. Only then it is going to happen. and don't be stupid about it. Don't be like, you quit the job next day and you don't have a plan in your mind and you are just doing anything. Be smart about it. Work towards changing that situation, and always remember the 70-30 rule. So if you're happy 70% of the time and you are sad 30% of the time, that's fine. That's going to happen in any job. There is no perfect job on this planet. But if the ratio is really skewed, where you are unhappy most of the time and stuff like that is happening, you have to like move towards changing that situation. And once you put your mind to it, you will be able to do it. There is no dearth of good opportunities. There are ample good opportunities available. You just have to be very good at your job. You have to be hardworking, and you need to have a lot of persistence. If you do that, you will have ample options. Anshush, can you show that image, that 4 circle one? So this is one concept that I personally love, and your goal for next few years is to find your ikigai. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing it right. It's a Japanese word. And if you're able to discover this, you will be able to have like a very fulfilling career. And that is what you need to do. So all these 4 important 4 things are very, very important. What you love, what the world needs, what you can be paid for, and what you're good at. If you can find an intersection of these things, you will have a very successful career. And the only way to find an intersection is keep experimenting, keep learning, keep interning with 100 other organizations. I personally, when I was in college, I interned with so many companies that, when I moved out, I really had an idea as to what I like doing and what I'm good at. So I'm not saying that it's going to be very easy to find this answer, but that is what you have to move towards, right? So that is what I would like to say. If you guys give me 5 more minutes, I would like to tell you guys like one tiny little story which is connected to MBA and careers and all. And I read that very, very long time ago, and that is for if you want to ever answer this question to yourself, right? Whether I should do an MBA or not, and what kind of career do I want to have. So I'll just go ahead and tell you that story, and then we're going to end the session. Anshush, you can remove this image. Thank you. Yeah. So once upon a time, what happened was that there was this jungle, and a lion, used to be the king of that jungle. And he realized that, in winters, all the animals face a lot of problem because, there's not enough food that is available to people. And he was like an entrepreneur, and he had this thing in his head that, what I'll do is I'll build a company which is going to work on food storage so that animals don't, find difficulty in finding food when there is winters, and I can take something in return from them and I can give them food. So that is what he decided to do. So what he did was that he established a little company, and he hired 2 ants who used to work for him to like get food and storage and all that. And those ants did a fantastic job. They were the most hardworking people he could have imagined. Those ants used to come before he came to the office and left after he left. So that went on for a while. And then what happened was that lion thought that if these ants are doing so well without supervision, what if I hire a supervisor and see what happens, and maybe their productivity is going to increase, right? So what the client did was he hired a bee who was a very good supervisor and had a track record for that. And that bee was a great, had a great record, and she came with an assistant. And she also said that, a smart thing to do would be establish a corporate strategy department. And she got another friend of hers along with it who established the corporate strategy department. And all that started happening. And, what really started happening was that company started growing, and there were a lot of multiple people that joined in. So there was a corporate strategy department that got established. They established an HR department because so much was happening in terms of human resources. And then they established a computers department, and stuff like that happened, right? The story in a very short manner because I want you guys to get a crux of it. And the company grew. But what happened was that at the end of the year, when the lion sat down and analyzed, he realized that actual productivity and actually what he wanted to do was not happening in a scale that he had imagined. So what he did was he hired an owl, who was the fanciest consultant in the market, and that Owl spent some time in the company, and he prepared a very big, huge volumes of report. And ultimately, the crux of that report was, that the company is overstaffed. So I want you guys to guess who got fired first. You can write your answers in the chat. So basically, the Owl came up with the report that, yeah. So who wrote this? So I'm not able to see this person's name. Yeah. So yeah, you guys got it right. So basically, ants got fired first, because that is unfortunately how corporates work, right? Sometimes the most hardworking employees are the hardest hit for no fault of theirs, and that is unfortunately the truth. You guys have to figure out your own careers, and you have to be extremely valuable, that if you are not working out for one job, you'll be able to find another job very easily. You should have alternate streams of revenue. So this is again something I tell all the people who approach me for advice, is that think of having a side hustle along with your permanent job. And in foreign countries, it is so popular. People have a side hustle along with their corporate job. So if that job doesn't work out, they work on their side hustles. And some of the greatest companies in the world started off as side hustles, including Facebook, Apple, WeWork, Instagram. So all these were started when those people were already in their full-time jobs. So this idea of leaving your job and sitting and working on your company solely is just a very Indian concept, and that is not how you have to do it. You validate your idea, you start building it while you are in the job. After, so the thing is that I understand till 8 o'clock, if you're working and then till 8 o'clock, you are gonna be absolutely busy. But what you do from 10 to 2 at night is gonna decide what kind of life you will have. So if you really are passionate and ambitious, nothing can stop you from achieving what you want. It's just that you be very smart about how you go about it and make very cautious decisions. So that is what I feel about all this, and I really enjoyed talking to you guys. And you can always reach out to me over LinkedIn with your specific questions. I will try to answer them to the best of my ability. And especially if you're starting a company, I do have a fair bit of experience in the industry, and I'll try to help you out. And that being said, if I receive anybody's request from the particular college, I will accept it on LinkedIn. So yeah, you guys can do that. So that's it from my side.
Thank you so much, Tanya. That was a great story, and we got to learn several things about entrepreneurship that we might have been not aware of earlier. So thank you for that, and it was a great session. So now I'd like to request Dr. Kusha Tiwari ma'am, our convener of Innovation Council, to say a few words.
Yeah, that was really actually a very illuminating session, and a different one in the sense that we generally have webinars, which is most of the time a one-way channel where the one person speaks and the rest of the audience listens. So I really like the format which all of you, the student members of Innovation Councils, have actually come up with. That there is more interaction. There are a lot of questions. I could see that there are so many questions that had come even from some of the faculty members, and I think that must have resolved a lot of queries and a lot of questions that young people have in their mind when it comes to thinking about entrepreneurship, or when it comes to thinking about what next after they finish their college. Entrepreneurship basically is being used in the academia in a very regular way these days. But generally, I think in the academia, it's more about the theoretical aspect of that field. And I really liked the way you have actually addressed the practical concerns of entrepreneurship, as well as, opportunities and the things that the students or young individuals are required to look out for if they want to be entrepreneurs, if they are thinking of becoming entrepreneurs. So it was really informative. It was extremely engaging. And I'm very, very happy that our audiences and participants have actually very actively participated in that. It seems like a good format. We'll try and follow this format in the other webinars and workshops that we are right now, subsequently conducting virtually. So thank you so much, Ms. Tanya, for coming here or sparing your time for us. And it was great to have you. We would definitely like to have you again with us in some time future. And
Absolutely.
stay happy and stay safe. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. And with this, we'd like to end up with the webinar. And if anyone has any questions regarding this, then people can reach out to Ms. Tanya to her LinkedIn ID, or you can also mail us at our Gmail ID, which has been mentioned in the chat below. So thank you once again, Ms. Tanya.
Thank you.